Hello, class. My name is Chelsea Tate, and for my final presentation for CM585 Addictions and Substance Abuse, I will be focusing on the case of Jesus, which focuses essentially on a internet gaming disorder. So just a little background information about Jesus. Jesus is 16-year-old Hispanic male. He's a high school student, so at about age 16, he could possibly be considered a sophomore or junior, depending on how his birthday falls. Jesus has very minimal, if not any, social interaction in school. So it is mentioned in the study that when he is being observed, that he's being observed alone, whether that's at lunch or in any other settings. And when he's at home, he spends majority of his time in his room where his parents and his family can hear him kind of laughing while he's playing his video game. And Jesus also has this demonstrated lack of interest in family or the treatment of his family. Um, but he's very interested in reading and video games. When he speaks about video games, it's like he's very present and he lights up. So the concerns have been brought to his parents by his counselor. Um, with his grades dropping and him not doing homework, Jesus has been lying to his parents saying he's been doing it in a particular period, like the study hall period, but that hasn't been the case. Um, you know, they don't know kind of what's going on. But Jesus is just very focused, very determined to, play his games. And so for ethical considerations, when dealing with Jesus' situation, informed consent, as well as which is, I'm sorry, code A.2A in the ACA Code of Ethics, as well as B.1A, which is multicultural diversity and considerations. Informed consent is always necessary in counseling. It allows our clients to have control kind of over the process, letting them know what's going on, what's going to be happening, so they're not blindsided throughout everything that's going on. And with multicultural diversity and diversity considerations, understanding there may be language barriers or just cultural differences. So having an understanding of your client's background can help in making the process or the counseling process a little better, a little smoother. So as far as Jesus' situation, he's an Hispanic male. Um, what considerations are possibly there. Like we said, we don't really know a lot of information, a lot of background or family information about him to go off on, but it is good to have that knowledge and understanding going into a session so that, you don't get a client who doesn't feel like their counselor understands them or can even help them due to cultural differences. And just a little bit of information on the history of gaming. So online gaming essentially became popular in early 2000s, but it's been around for years. Some say the late 50s. Others say it's more notable for around the 70s. So games are, considered stress relievers, just a way to pass time. Gaming has evolved so much throughout the years. With the development in technology and everything, we see a lot of people are being paid to be gamers, paid to, they're having these big events like Comic Cons, but they're for gamers. And people come out and they play and they win money. So there is this occupational component to gaming that has since come to fruition since the start of gaming. That is also good to know. And the streaming aspect of gaming, a lot of people spend time on YouTube or Twitch or all these other different platforms to watch some of their favorite gamers play games or how they beat a certain level or things of that nature. As far as the addiction portion of gaming is concerned, it is something that is still being studied. There's still much research that needs to come out of this. There is this discrepancy amongst professionals, however, if it's a disorder that can stand alone or if it encompasses something else. So, for instance, I remember reading an article during the course that, basically highlighted how gaming or all these process addictions, while they are something to look at or something that it could be notable, that they could take away from these addictions and disorders that are already in place, or they have some involvement, somewhat like of that of schizophrenia. Like, is there being too much time being spent on trying to understanding gaming and the harms of gaming versus trying to dig deeper, give further research into disorders that have already been categorized, such as schizophrenia. So I think it's interesting that there's this debate in the professional world about the harms and effects of gaming, and while the research is not much, the research that is present offers very great considerations in the harms of gaming and what that can lead to down the line. And as mentioned earlier, Jesus is an Hispanic male. So the culture and additional considerations for Jesus being an Hispanic male is the fact that research indicates that males spend more time in gaming than females. So with that aspect, this is going to affect them more. Mental health concerns for them are a little bit greater. And given Jesus's age, as well. The social aspect that tends to be lacking in school is one that can be found when he is playing online. So, you know, as we mentioned in the study, Jesus is not really interacting with his peers or really having um social bonds or friendships at school, but when he's at home and when he's gaming, that's where his social interaction comes from. Jesus's age is a key consideration as well. He is a teenager, and this need or the desire to hang out with your family, like when you're 16, 15, 17, this is at this stage where you're finding yourself and you're trying to explore your identity outside of your family. So it's not uncommon that Jesus would not be spending time with his family and spending time with his little sister as he would, hanging out with friends or going out. But Jesus is not really doing the hanging out in person. He is very focused and very much um, involved in gaming with online peers, which would be, this alternate world of sorts that he thrives in. But the reality of what's going on with him is that he is just kind of completely disconnected from the real world. So that is something to consider. Also, with as mentioned, with him being a teenager, um, we also need to understand the family dynamics. It sounds like he comes from a two-parent household. We don't know what his parents do for work. We don't really know uh, what that looks like. But in the case study, it kind of has me thinking that maybe they aren't paying as much attention to Jesus because they consider him to be this easygoing kid. They really don't have any problems out of him, but they're not concerned, or they did not notice any behavior or conduct changes until they were brought to their attention, such as him being mean to his younger sister, um, just his lack of regret and feeling for that is something that is very important and something to note. So the cultural considerations of ethnicity and family backgrounds and family dynamics is important. The age of the client, as I mentioned, Jesus being a teenager, what teenagers do you know that majority of them are always hanging with their family or always wanting to be around family. So that's something to keep in mind. And as far as assessment and screening tools, for Jesus, I went with the video game addiction scale, which is a 10-question survey that offers the yes, no, or sometimes as answers. And it is used just kind of as a way to self, not diagnose, but to for self-awareness, like if you think you're having this problem, taking this scale or this video game addiction scale can kind of help you see that maybe you need to seek help. But even if you don't take it and you feel like there is a problem or family members feel like there's an issue, um, they can take, you seek out help essentially. As far as the additional screening tool, I also chose the gaming addiction identification test, which the plus on this is it is on a 15 point 15 item, excuse me, 5-point scale, with some of the questions or the first two questions indicating the period of time that gaming is being played. So I spend, if the statement is I spend this much time, excessive time gaming, and it gives you options from 1 to 2 hours, 4 to 6 hours. They vary and they range. The plus about this particular screening tool is that it is offered in another language. I could not necessarily find that Spanish or any other like French or language of that sort was offered, but it is offered in Swedish. The downside to this is that if this is something that's giving to Jesus, understanding Jesus's level of language. Is he fluent in English? The understanding or meaning of words. When we think about assessments, we have to be mindful and have that cultural consideration that, excuse me, that language tends to vary. So the meaning of some phrases in the modern English language can be different in Spanish or different in Arabic. But being mindful that that plays a key role into how assessments or screening tools can be used or can be accurate, the validity and the reliability of that tool. Moving on to the DSM-5, I use the text revision version for diagnosing. For Jesus, the best way to describe it would be internet gaming disorder. However, this is not an official category, so there's no code. It's not listed um, anywhere under like substance addiction, addictions, and other um, disorders like gambling is. Gambling is probably the only process addiction um, that has its own category. So, with there being no code for this, I also considered obsessive compulsive disorder. There are a couple of studies that kind of indicate that obsessive compulsive disorder can be linked to video game addiction, um, based on the criteria. So the criteria that I chose that would have been best suited for Jesus is criteria B, which in this criteria indicates that the presence of the compulsion or the obsession basically has, it's overtaken kind of somebody's life and has stopped or minimized functionality. So, for instance, Jesus does not have in person social interactions. Gaming is taking up his time to where he's doing this, it sounds like more than an hour daily. And it's time consuming. So, you know, He's not like, oh, I'm an hour here, an hour there. We don't know how much time he is spending gaming, but we know it's excessive to the point where his homework isn't being turned in. And if we are going with Jesus based on this current state, he could have access to these video games on his phone, and during that study hall period where he's saying he's doing homework, Jesus could be playing a game. So it's kind of like, especially if it's at the palm of his hand, the level of obsession and addiction that comes with that, it is alarming. Going back to internet gaming disorder, IGD, for Jesus, if this was not something that was to be considered, Jesus fits the criteria of maybe four options that come into internet gaming disorder. So his tolerance level, there are these negative consequences, like, he's falling behind in school, he's not taking care of what he needs to take care of. His priorities have changed. And with that, we run the risk of Jesus failing and having to repeat this sophomore or junior year over. And even that can, lead to further mental health concerns for him. As far as a rule out, I obviously ruled out substance abuse and addiction, given that there is no presence of a substance. But I also ruled out like conduct disorders, um, because while Jesus is having a spurt of, he's being mean to his sister, or he just doesn't care about feelings, there were not any other criteria that he met to, consume that as an option for him. So the level of severity, for Jesus has a moderate level of severity with his gaming addiction. Um, Jesus does not, or if Jesus is not, treated for this immediately, we can, currently see how this can go from moderate to severe really quick. We would hate for Jesus to spend his time just gaming all day long. So as I mentioned previously, Jesus exhibits 4 of the 9 points for criteria if we were going with internet gaming disorder as the chosen diagnosis. And with this moderate level of gaming addiction, Jesus is still going about his daily life as if there aren't any issues or any problems, but um what's to say that he won't seek further than what's already going on? What's to say he won't start skipping classes completely to go home and play video games, or to, find some quiet place and be in solitude to play video games? There are several concerns for the level of severity for Jesus. As far as a treatment option for Jesus, I decided on the multidimensional family therapy approach. So Jesus is a minor. He is still young and, kind of slightly impressionable. So I think with the withdrawal, having access to his family within his having access to his family within his therapeutic process can be helpful for multiple fronts, not just for this obsession or addiction with gaming, but to help rebuild and connect his relationship with his family, with his sister, and maybe even work on additional relationships outside of that. So the family system is important to address concerns for substance and addictions or behavioral uh, addictions and disorders. So, that support that you get from your family, thinking about people who go to rehab, or thinking about people who have these different levels of care, and that treatment is, family. You have things like, I know there are programs that offer like family days to still give you that semblance of home if that is what you need. But as far as Jesus's condition is concerned, the access to his family is greatly important, because if they understand what the treatment plan is for him, they can help him along the way. That means monitoring his internet usage, monitoring his gaming, using gaming as an incentive. And because this is the only kind of social interaction that he's having, we have to be careful about how that is perceived, or how he reacts, to the removal of like the game. So if Jesus isn't doing his homework, you know okay, he loses out on gaming time. There's, things to consider in having the parents there, the family there. They are able to receive the tools that they need to help Jesus moving along in the process. In the case study, it did mention that Jesus's parents, they wanted to meet with his therapist or his counselor one on one, but Jesus was not comfortable with them meeting the counselor alone. Um, so he wanted to do that family session, and I think that or he wanted to meet them together. And I don't know if that is because he didn't know what they would ask. But them to be involved in their treatment, did it make him hesitant for what he would say or what they would say to the counselor? But Jesus has opened this door, or the segue, into a familial approach. Now, the benefits and limitations for multidimensional family therapy. So, for MDFT approach, the benefit is that the relationship can be restored, or this helps to restore relationship. And Jesus is at the point where, you know, as mentioned, he has a disconnect from his family. So maybe the involvement of his family um, kind of opens up other concerns that he might have, or feelings that he might have, so they can work on it as a family and move forward. It also can change the negative perception of treatment. So, you know, you have your child going to counseling and they might not feel comfortable. Having your parents there, your family there, depending on the dynamic, kind of gives you maybe a sense of courage, or this sense of like, hey, this isn't a bad thing, or it doesn't have to be seen as a bad thing with counseling. So it may loosen Jesus up a little bit, because he has had sessions and he hasn't really been receptive to those sessions. It could be because Jesus doesn't think he has a problem. Jesus could just be seeing it as him being a teenager. Jesus doesn't want to be there, so this could open him up into his therapeutic process, into salvaging the relationship with not only his parents, but with his sister, and how to kind of better himself moving forward. I would say that the limitations of this approach um, is allowing the family in. Um, so Jesus, while he has not been receptive to counseling or to any of the sessions, having his family there might bring him some hesitancy in what he reveals or what he's thinking, you know, not so much as to protect his family, but to kind of maybe guard or protect himself. I think that's something to consider. Also, another limitation based on research is the cost that's associated with this particular treatment. So, as I mentioned, we don't know um, the class of the family. We don't know if they're upper class, middle class, lower class, working class. We do not know. Um, So, cost for treatment is something to be very concerned about because if you cannot afford it, if you don't have the insurance, if your insurance isn't going to cover it, these are all things you need to consider when seeking out treatment, when seeking out help. So, having a cost effective approach is definitely important, but this is also an approach that is considerably um, more cost effective than like CBT. Um, Per research. So the counselor and client roles as well as the relapse prevention plan. So for MDFT, this treatment is of three stages. First stage is enhanced treatment motivation, building the therapeutic relationship, as well as creating a treatment plan. So going in, identifying this is the problem or this is the concern. So what do we do to fix it? How do we set the goals and what are we doing to achieve them? Number two on that stage requires the interventions for parents as well as the interventions for Jesus. And then three is the creation of the relapse prevention plan. So in addition to these three stages that have been offered in research, um, or different studies as it regards multidisciplinary the family approach, um, there has to be willing participation from the clients, as well as the parents. Another consideration with this or is that there is going to be some separation in sessions, but there is also going to be this overall group dynamic. So the sessions with the parents could include, hey, these are ways that we can help Jesus based on our treatment plans. The session with Jesus is going to be, this is your treatment plan. How do we set up these goals and what are we doing to achieve these goals? So everybody's doing their part to work as a collaborative effort. As far as the relapse prevention plan, with the family, part of goal setting, understanding and identifying the high risk situations or problem behaviors, as well as identifying new activity or future high risk is important. So, for Jesus, it could be like, is it summertime? And you know, I might not have school, but I'm still playing my game 5, 6 hours a day. That's a situation where, like, he's falling back into bad habits. And as the parents, this is also a way to say, okay, we see this is going on. Do we put Jesus in some type of program for the summer? And these programs can also cater to his likes, which his interests are reading and gaming. So trying to identify things like that. Um, Another form of intervention or therapy I chose was expressive arts therapy for Jesus. So when I think about gaming, I think about the detailed orientation of it. Watching or playing games, there is just this alternate universe, this alternate world. But with expressive arts, it allows for the client to explore alternatives to gaming. Um, so that gaming is no longer becoming a problem. Online gaming is not a problem until it is. So Jesus only has his social interactions with his online peers, and those who are addicted to gaming or addicted to online, they feel lonely and disconnected from the real world, which we don't necessarily know if Jesus feels lonely. We just know that he has been observed alone in certain school settings, and he prefers to be in his room when he's at home. So that disconnect from the real world, though, is something that Jesus may be experiencing because he does not have those in-person social interactions that are so important to development as well as the mental health. This can be something that's done at home. This is a way to rebuild and build connections. So this whole idea of expressive arts therapy and online gaming came from our stay-at-home period during COVID, but I think that this research would still apply even outside of that. I see gaming as an art because there is this type of art or delicate science to how a game is played. There is this thought-provoking um, detail in what should happen and how to move forward on the game. So I think expressive arts is going to be a beneficial factor or beneficial treatment option. And benefits and limitations. So Jesus likes to read and also play video games. So with expressive arts can be music, literature, drawing, all these different things. So, Jesus can find a different outlet, like maybe creating a novel or maybe trying to design his own video game, you know, and that could kind of be a double-edged sword, but you know, having that insight to the background on that is a way to express his likes and maybe even express it with others or share it with others and make a connection that way because there may be other students that he can play with or write with that also have the same interest. And as I mentioned, this is a way that can build and reconnect his relationship with his family and allow him to make friends at school if he kind of steps out on that. This is also a cost effective option. It's not a lot. But I will say that the limitation to this is the amount of research that shows the connection of gaming addictions to expressive arts and the counselor and client roles. So for if utilizing art therapy, Jesus would need to find a specialist, or the parents would need to have a recommended or referral to a specialist who deals in art therapy. Um, so because they have a better understanding of this method, and also because this is something that he can do at home. If it is something that he is pursuing at home, having check-ins with his therapist, to kind of say, hey, maybe this is something that I'm doing, or if it is something he is going to see his therapist about, creating as a therapist, creating the environment. So, if he's going to write a story, having access to the tools and materials that he needs to succeed or move forward in sessions. And for Jesus, his level of care, he's at a level 1, which will be outpatient. So, outpatient treatment focuses on the individual and group sessions. Even a regular family requirements, involvement in different methods for counseling or treatment. So with this level of care, Jesus is not um, in a facility. He is not like he's not unable to move forward in his daily activities. So having this outpatient, I think, still gives him this semblance of normalcy of being a teenager. His severity level is not such that he needs around the clock monitoring in that way. But if we don't get this addressed, that is something that Jesus will have concerns with moving forward. Also, the other options of care for Jesus, just were not suitable to kind of where his current uh his current state is in gaming. And that is my presentation. I look forward to feedback and concerns or, just kind of things to touch on moving forward. Thank you.